Factory.
Rocking and rolling with Slide and the Drift. Thanks to my friend Claude Gavremont, who has too much time on his hands for that awesome piece of music. Check him out. Local band, support local. Welcome, everybody, to the Musky Monday Seminar Series, Episode 8. Really excited about this week. Dr. Sean Landsman is here for Ask the Biologist, as usual, and we're going to talk about color selection and musky vision. And then one of the coolest guys in the musky industry, Spencer Berman, is here. We were looking for a title for this show, and so the Spencer Berman interview. Just talking to Spencer, there is so much knowledge inside his head, and it's not even a very old head. Spencer's in his early 30s, but he's packed a lifetime of learning into his musky fishing already. He's one of the most successful guides in the industry, one of the most successful tournament anglers, won more money than anyone I know in the musky business, and he catches tons and tons of muskies. The numbers will blow you away. We'll get to those before too long. Spencer's also his primary water is Lake St. Clair, but I admire his learning curve. You know, this is a show about learning, and Spencer's learning curve is what all of you should do if you want to learn about more muskies, learn how to catch more muskies. He's fished a lot of different waters with a lot of different experienced people. He's humble and he's taken the lessons and the learning from all of them. So we're going to try and extract some of that key knowledge from him today. So can't wait to bring Spencer out in a little bit. We've got some new technology this week. I plugged in a new computer, and so far it's working. So I hate learning new technology, except when it relates to a boat. But this is apparently essential stuff. Hopefully we look a little better and sound a little better today for you as well. We get our thank yous out of the way at the beginning of our show, as always. So thank you, the viewer. Our audience numbers are way more than we'd envisioned at the start of this. So I guess you like what's going on. Your questions, your comments, the topics that you want to hear drive this show. So especially today, send your questions in for Spencer. You can't have a broader mind in the musky world to answer those. Thanks to my team behind the scenes, as always. Mike Spratt, my partner from Musky Factory Baits. Jason Riley, our marabou man. Jason passed me 35 new marabous this week. And if you love your marabous, that is a really special piece of musky material. They never last very long. If you want one, get it soon. We'll be getting another batch in 4 or 5 weeks. Lisa Goodyear, full-time guide with the Musky Factory, producer extraordinaire, guide extraordinaire. Come out and say hi, Lisa.
Hey, Dom.
Fantastic to see you as always. Thanks for making us look good, as you always do. What do you want to tell us?
Well, speaking of looking at goods, I got to say we've had a ton of comments on your new haircut. People are loving it.
My mother is going to love this more than anything. We just got out of the COVID lockdown around here this week. I went and got the haircut right away, Mom. I hope it looks a little more respectable for you. So thanks. Appreciated.
And also, just while we're here, just wanted to do another shout out to Muskies Canada course. The virtual Odyssey is coming up April 17th and 18th. I'm excited to be volunteering behind the scenes, but also to be presenting on the Women and Muskies panel. And I know you're presenting a couple of times yourself, John. So we're looking forward to this one. Make sure you go and check out their Facebook page, Muskies of Canada Official, and also it'll be broadcast to YouTube. So check out and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well.
Super. That's probably the most learning about muskies that you can put together in one place. 16 speakers, a women's panel, a fly fishing segment. And all the different Muskies Canada chapters are going to talk about muskies in their area. So Georgian Bay, New Brunswick, Southern Ontario, Quebec, all over the place. So wherever you fish, there's something in that for you. And the money raised supports Muskies Canada and supports muskie research. So really good things coming up there. Thanks, Lisa. And Mike Kadura behind the scenes as well. Hey, Mike.
Hey,
Styling
John,
as
how are
always.
you? Hey, good to see you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Are your fingers sore from tying skirts this past
I'll
week?
tell you, man, I've been rolling up the sleeves. This has been so much fun this winter between that and then, like I love our Muskie Factory Facebook page. Make sure you like that because I like watching that and looking at that. And then our YouTube channel too. Make sure you're subscribed to that. So between that, tying lures and everything, it's almost like 12-month a year muskie season for me, which is exactly what I would want.
Yeah, all I do is muskies 24/7, 365 days a year now, it seems. And you could spend your life in a worse way. I'm pretty pleased to be doing this. So thanks as always, Mike. Mike will be behind the scenes answering your questions. So will Lisa. And if we don't get to your questions today, I don't know what we have now, 2,000 comments and questions since we started this, and we have answered all the questions so far, and we'll continue to do that. So please keep them coming. Thanks to Shimano, as always. Shimano's been a big part of my fishing for a lot of years. They drive research, they drive technology, support who supports you in life and in the muskie world. Thanks to Andre Lalonde, Crestliner Boats and Mercury Motors. Andre Lalonde out in Wendover, the best boatman I have ever had. And I've had a few. Andre keeps me on the water day after day. And guides are not, we are 4-wheel drive with our boat. So that's a challenge. Suick Lures, really proud to be on the, got to get used to this. Really proud to be on the team on Team Suick. Chaos Tackle. Spencer and I are both big fans of Medusas and Chaos Tackle and their soft plastics. We'll talk about those in the show. Thanks to Muskies Canada. Big part of my learning curve for over 25 years, I think, at this point. So many good reasons to be a member of Muskies Canada. They teach you to catch more muskies. They are the voice of the muskies in your country. They shape management. Nobody lobbies more for muskies or has the attention of the DNR or looks after muskie management more than Muskies Canada. Spencer and I had a great talk yesterday about Muskies Canada and Muskies Incorporated and the importance of those organizations. So if you're not a member, pay attention and we'll give you some really good reasons to do that. Throw a shout out to Ryan Pickering at the Kitchener-Waterloo chapter. Got a lot of things going on down there. Great chapter to be a part of. You can attend all the Muskies Canada chapter meetings online if you're a member. Ryan's got a really great event coming up on February 24th. He's got a trolling panel of monster trollers in the muskie world, including catfish. One of my faves to hang out with at the muskie shows on the state side for a bunch of years. 5 great names there. That one's not even a private one. Normally, Muskies Canada meetings are broadcast just to members. Ryan's doing this on StreamYard as well. Even if you're not a member, check this out. It'll show you the kind of learning that you have access to through the club. Something that you don't want to miss. And I'm going to throw a shout out to the Musky Trader, the guys at Musky Trader. If you don't know what Musky Trader is, go and find that group on Facebook. 4,300 members plus. They raise a lot of money for a lot of good causes, and they're conducting a symposium, a research fundraiser, and information symposium, tying the benefits of research directly to the anglers. And this is an event supported by the anglers. As anglers and as muskie anglers, it's up to us to look after our community. You can't just be a taker. The muskie populations are fragile. You got to give back. And so this is one that's going to raise a bunch of money that's going to go directly to research. Check out Musky, the Musky Trader group on Facebook. We'll give you more information about that when it's coming up. And I'll give you a little bit of the Musky Monday Seminar Series coming up next week. Gord Pizer and his grandson, Liam. Liam's 19 going on 50 in the muskie world because he's been hanging out with Gord for a long time. Gord's maybe the best fisherman Canada's produced, the best one in the modern day. Tune in next week. He's going to blow your mind with some really current research on musky poo and what it means to you and how you may catch more fish from hearing about that cutting edge research. The week after that, Jimmy Sarik's here, the best ambassador that the muskie world has had for the past couple of decades, Muskie Hunter Television. Pete Bowman is coming here the week after that from Fish in Canada. He's going to talk about the two biggest giants ever put on television back to back in the modern day. Crazy story. He's fished all over the country. One of the most fun guys to hang out with. Pete Mayna's the week after that, and Jason Quintano. Jason, I've hung out with. I have some crazy stories about hanging out with Jason at the U.S. Muskie shows, and I have had the pleasure of being in Jason's boat along with Spencer in the past. I think we'll show you a picture of that or two from that coming up. Jason is one of the most technical trollers I have ever been with. Monster successful. He's one of the guys that's won more money than anyone else with Spencer on Clair. You don't want to miss that show. That's coming up on March 29th. So lots of good things to look forward to. And it's time to bring in our favorite doctor, Dr. Sean Landsman, and the Ask the Biologist segment. Every time I see you, there's just a whole lot of teeth and a smile, man. Always happy. Good to hang out with you again, Sean.
Thanks, John. Yeah, happy to be here. I always get a kick out of the fact that your mom is lurking in the background watching this, because I think both my parents are too. There's not a lot to do in COVID times, and they're probably talking about my hair, which hasn't been cut in a year. I'm due for a haircut for sure.
Yeah, well, I just got it this past week. My mom is 87, and she grinds on me, when I'm not when the long hair thing isn't her thing. And so, I got a few letters. I read them out earlier, and we're both just really happy that our parents care about us. Love you a lot, Mom. Thanks for being here. And I hope you enjoy the Muskie Talk today. What are you going to teach my mom today, Sean?
I'm going to teach your mom about muskie vision and color. And how muskies pick up color and shapes and things in their environment, and how really their vision is perfectly attuned to the environment in which they live. So hopefully there's going to be some interesting little tidbits of information that people will pick up on that might help them make some more informed decisions about bait color choice in the future. All right, so let's get this kicked off. So before we actually dive into this topic too much, I want to set a little bit of groundwork here about what exactly what structures in the eye relate to how fish and other animals are able to perceive the world around them. And if you're a little bit familiar with rods and cones, you may have heard of these before, but you might not be that aware of what exactly they do. So here on the right, it's just a schematic of what these two structures look like. So you can see, the rods here gets named from this structure there, and then the cones there. And both of these structures have, in some ways, similar purposes, and in other ways, very different functions. So, for example, rods are really well attuned to helping animals with vision at night, whereas on the other hand, cones play a big role in daytime vision. The other thing rods do really well is they help animals pick up movement, shape, and then just able to discern general differences in size of things that they're looking at. Cones, on the other hand, this is really where color comes into play. So the rods aren't really responsible for detecting color. It's the cones that really do that. And then from the cones, you also get some information related to detail as well as shape. Okay. Now, what we should also get into a little bit here is that there's actually two kinds of cones. So we have a single cone and a double cone. And a single cone in an animal eye is really better at distinguishing detail, but a double cone is better at distinguishing shape and can detect more color as well. So double cone cells are also sensitive to yellow-orange wavelengths, whereas single cone cells are more sensitive to like greens and purples and blues. So keep that in mind, because we're going to take a look at what we know about musky, or maybe to be a little more specific, esochid eye structures. So the question that I've gotten in the past, I actually gave a similar presentation to the Ottawa chapter of Muskies Canada not too long ago. And one of the questions I got was, do muskies actually see in color? And the bottom line is that no one's actually looked into this specifically with muskies, but they have with pike. And of course, what we know is that pike and muskies are very closely related. So what we know from pike, I think it's pretty reasonable to extrapolate that to muskies. Okay, so if we operate under that assumption, then let's take a look at what we've got here. And so when we look at pike eyes, and probably by extension musky eyes as well, what we see are three structures in the eye itself. We've got the rods, we've got double cones, and we've got single cones. The most prevalent structure in a pike eye or an esochid's eye would be the rods. And in the second place there are double cones, and then the least prevalent would be the single cone cells. So what really does this mean then for muskies? Well, this means a handful of things. First of all, a muskie's vision is adapted to dark or dim conditions, and this makes sense. If anyone has ever dived into the water and gone down, a few feet, or even 8 or 10 feet, however far your breath can kind of take you, or if you're a scuba diver, you know just how dark it is down at depth. And so this makes sense that muskies would have vision that is well adapted to darker conditions. Keep in mind too that this fish species, muskies, they actually evolved as a riverine species, and now can inhabit lakes, of course, but they evolved from riverine ancestors. So what do we typically think of with rivers? Rivers tend to be darker, dirtier water. St. Lawrence River aside, that's got like Caribbean-esque water clarity, but a lot of rivers are pretty dirty and dingy. So what we also know from the structure of their eyes is that they work very well in daylight. So they have a pretty high percentage of cone cells, and so that also tells us not only can their eyes see well in darkness, but they can also see pretty well in daylight as well. Because there's a lot of rods, that structure within their eyes, they can also easily detect movement. They can also easily distinguish shapes. And again, distinguishing shapes is a function both of rods and cone cells. And so they have a high percentage of both of those structures in their eyes. We also know that they're attuned to yellows, oranges, and reds based on the pretty high percentage of double cone cells that we see within their eyes. But because detail is not prioritized, we know detail is not prioritized because of the single cone cells and the relatively limited number of them within their eyes. So they're able to pick up color, but they're not able to really pick up detail. And that's why I included that picture there of those live target crankbaits. Live target lures are famous in the angling community for creating these ultra realistic paint jobs, but at least with muskies, I think that those are probably going to catch more buyers than they are fish. In other words, I wouldn't be that concerned about like specific patterning. You can see on that smallmouth crankbait and the second from the top there, and I guess that one on the bottom. You can see the, you know, how the barring kind of looks very random, much like you'd probably see on a fish. And I, you know, that level of detail, I don't think needs to apply in musky lures. Now, of course, John, I think is having maybe some internet issues here. I was going to get him to show.
I'm back.
He's back. He's back. All right, hold up that Susie sucker or that Medusa behind you. I've got a picture of that Shadzilla there. But, you know, to be honest, I do not own a sherbet colored or whatever that you want to call firetail colored bait like that. But you know, it's something to consider. I know John likes to throw that on the Ottawa, and that is a pattern to consider, because what we know about the structure of at least, you know, pike and musky eyes is that they are they're pretty well attuned to yellows, oranges, and reds. There you go. Exactly. I do like firetail baits for topwater lures too. All right, so. Something else we should probably get into a little bit, though, is color and how it relates to depth within a water column. So again, if any of you are scuba divers, you know that when you get down to depth, that everything looks really washed out. There's a reason, you know, GoPro sells red filters underwaters to bring some of that red back in, because red, when you get down at depth, red is one of the first colors to get filtered out of the water column. So what this diagram shows here is, as we go deeper, the only color in this case is 250 meters of depth. The only color that we might be able to see down there would be like blues and purples. Okay, but reds, oranges, yellows, those get filtered out of the water column really quickly. Okay, so this also probably makes sense. Okay, if we know that muskies and pike have eyes that are well attuned to yellows, oranges, and reds, if they spent most of their time in deep water, then they probably wouldn't have eyes that relate or that are that specifically adapted to those wavelengths of light. So what we know from their biology is that they are a pretty shallow water dwelling fish. And so this makes sense then, that they would have eyes that are really well adapted to yellows, oranges, and reds, which are very visible in shallow water. So what does this mean for you? One important thing to consider, though, is if we talk about bait color pattern and how like a fish and a muskie, in this case, might be able to pick it up, so you always have to consider the background. And I was trying to find an old muskie hunter article. I think it was one that Steve Heiting authored, and I don't remember the year, but I remember the images, and I remember when I was younger flipping through and just poring over, just like burned this article into my memory. Basically what he did was he took pictures of different baits with different filters or different colored film over the front of his camera lens, to give you a sense of what it might look like to look at a particular color pattern based on certain watercolors that you might be dealing with. So in the Ottawa River, we have water that's pretty dark, right? It might look kind of like my shirt here. And so if you had an all brown bait with this as the background, it's not going to appear very well. So if you've got a dark watercolor, what you might want to opt for is a brighter colored bait, whether that's, you know, all white or chartreuse or bright yellow or bright orange, something like that, to help it stand out from the background a bit. Again, if you were in clear water, you might go the other way. So if the water is pretty bright, the background is fairly bright, you might go with something darker. So you might go with like an all black or something. One thing to keep in mind, and I know like jailbird pattern baits and you know, John's got some blade colors like that in the background there. I certainly have high contrasting baits, but one thing to remember in the animal world, is that especially if you're a prey species of some sort, having the ability to camouflage yourself with the available with the environment is going to ensure your survival. So there's something called disruptive camouflage. So you might be tempted to think that a high contrasting bait like that jailbird suic there might be really easy to pick up in the water column. But in fact, that kind of a color pattern is what we might call disruptive camouflage. Now, disruptive camouflage, we get into a little more technical stuff there, and that involves some more random shapes and patterns. But having that kind of barring pattern actually makes it really difficult to, it makes it harder for a predator to pick up the outline of an animal in the distance or against the background. So you might actually think that that's actually a really bright colored, like easy to spot bait, when in fact, it might be actually a little more subtle, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because predators are accustomed to not seeing things that are super bright and bold in their environment. That said, something super bright and bold can stand out really easily and make it a target, an easy target. And again, if you're targeting shallow water, you might think about incorporating some yellows, oranges, and reds into your bait choice, in part because that will stand out in shallower water, because those wavelengths, those wavelengths of light haven't been filtered out yet. And number two, because we know musky eyes are well attuned to those colors. The vision or lateral line system is something that I get asked that quite a bit. Which one is more important for muskies? And one of my favorite studies actually looked at this. They effectively blinded and knocked out the lateral lines, and then looked on juvenile fish, fed them some fathead minnows, and then looked at how easily they were able to capture, or how efficiently they were able to capture their prey. And what they found was that muskies use vision to detect. So they see movement. Okay, remember, they got rods, a lot of rods in their eyes. That helps detect movement. And then they will orient to the prey. So they'll use vision to detect and then orient to prey. The vision system is also used to initiate that rapid strike, where they curl up into an S pattern and then shoot forward. But actually making those really fine scale adjustments to actually nail that fish or duck or whatever it happens to be, that's the function of the lateral line, and that helps them make these little last second adjustments to grab their prey. So muskies are just as good at capturing prey when they're blinded, so when they're just using their lateral line, as they are with sight intact, with their sight intact. So bottom line, muskies are definitely the apex predators of their environment and perfect hunting machines in freshwater systems. So again, as always, if you have more questions, please submit them to John, or you can email me directly. There's my email there, and I'm happy to field your questions.
Awesome as usual, Sean. Thanks. Even the parts that I missed. Sorry, I had to disappear for 15 minutes and have a heart attack over technology. I love technology. A couple of comments and questions. I got my scuba license when I was 16, so I could go and look for fish. Interestingly, that the purple is the color that appears deeper than anything else. Did you talk about bright days versus dark days and color selections on those at all? Did we touch on that?
We didn't touch on that. I mean, when it's darker out, you're just going to have less light filtering through the water column. So, anything that would, normally appear pretty bright, especially toward the surface, is going to be reduced even more. If you've got a darker sky, you might try, either going even darker than that, or if it's like a really dark, stormy condition and the fish is looking up, you might want to go with like a white, white colored bait. It just sort of depends on how dark the conditions are.
I love white baits. Pete Mena once said to me that just about everything a muskie eats has a white belly.
It's true.
Looking underneath. So, white is an underused color for us. When I started muskie fishing in the 70s, the first rule of color that was explained to me was you can use any color you want as long as it's black.
Yeah.
And that's still a good rule. And in the modern day, dark days, dark colors, light days, light colors is a fairly standard rule that people fishing for any fish go for, and that applies. That applies to me and for my thinking for muskies. So on a really bright sunny day, again, because we didn't get to answer this so well a couple weeks ago, this has been probably my best bright sunshine day color over anything else for years. This is also a good color I've learned at night and in dark days, I think, because it's reflective like a moon eye. But, picturing a fish that's underneath a bait and looking up, it looks like a disco ball. They can't get a real visual on what it is, just that it's got a lot of shine and refractivity and something that they go and hit. So, yeah, some basic rules.
Yeah,
Great.
That white color patterns. I used to use white a lot in shad-based reservoirs growing up fishing Illinois bodies of water. But when I moved up here, white works pretty well in some of the darker colored water bodies around here. So it stands out really well. It kind of glows when you get that dark brown water. So it's definitely one of my favorite color patterns for sure. White of some sort.
Me too, especially in the fall. Hopefully that gives everybody a few more choices, a little more insight into picking the lure that's going to catch the big fish. And thanks again, Sean. Learn new stuff every week with you, my friend. Appreciate you being here. All right, time to bring Spencer in after the run around to the router and all the other tech devices in the house to shut everything down. Happy to be here with you again. Spencer, welcome. Let me say a couple nice things. Let me say a couple nice things about Spencer before we actually let him talk. I met Spencer for the first time in Ohio, I think almost a decade ago, and I looked in my pictures, and our fishing goes back to 2012, 2013.
Yep. I think we met in 11, and I think we fished in 12 and 13. Yep.
Yeah. So I was really pleased to host you here. And it's funny, Sean's comments on colors. You got out on the Ottawa River and you looked at the tannin colored water and said, copper, got to have some gold. That's the baits that are going. And so, that color selection, depending on the type of water that you have, silver, gold, the metallic colors, you knew right where you wanted to go with colors right away. And that was bringing Spencer up here. And then I fished with Spencer a few different times down on Lake St. Clair. I remember just about everything from those trips because it's tremendous learning for me. That was my first times to Clair, my first times fishing with you. And there's a lot of regional knowledge in the muskie world. It's less regional now because there's so many opportunities to learn. The internet has connected us all, but there's still regional knowledge that is very specific to different areas. And that's important in terms of filling out the big picture and answering bigger questions for you. And so one of the things I said at the start of this was I really admire the learning curve that you went through. There are so many guys, like it is hard to establish yourself as a muskie guide when you are starting out, and a lot of people are gypsies, especially in the States. And you were an ultimate gypsy, like a lot of us, going to Indiana early in the season, and that was your home water at first, spending a whole lot of time in Minnesota in the heyday. Going back 15 and 20 years on the big lakes in Minnesota. You've done some great learning on Eagle Lake with Steve Herbeck up here. You've traveled all over and you've fished with great people. And so really look forward to exploring this with you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Lisa's going to show a video that is one of my very favorite my very favorite fish videos, because as a guide, we get asked a lot, how long does it take to reel one of those fish into the boat? And the answer surprises people a lot. And in your case, the answer is 5 seconds. So I count this when I show people this video. This is almost a 50-pound fish, if not. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1000. Well,
I think he started a second late, but yeah, I think it's under 5 seconds.
so this is 50 pounds from hook to net and captured. Hey, book it. Now, and that is just an amazing, amazing fish. We'll talk about that in terms of perspective on fair. 55 and a quarter, 26.75. Those numbers chart out right around 50 pounds, don't they? And there's never officially been a 50-pound fish weighed out of Clair. Is that right?
48 and a half is the heaviest one ever, a certified weight.
Certified weight. You know what? I'm your fan and your friend, so I'm going to say that you beat that, my friend, and you let it swim away. So, but if it's not officially weighed, then it's not official. But that may be the biggest fish ever taken out of Clair, and one of my favorite videos of all time. 50 pounds in 5 seconds. That is insane. You're one of the pioneers of casting out on St. Clair, right? That's traditionally trolling water.
Yeah. When I first started my career, I grew up on the south side of Detroit, between Detroit and Toledo, and I fished Detroit River and I fished St. Clair both growing up. And we did most of our casting in the Detroit River or around the perimeters of the lake, and never really in the open water. They have been actually casting muskies on St. Clair for a long, long time, but they'd never really done it in the open water environment where all the trolling was going on, which that tended to be one of the things that worked really well in my favor. Once I kind of got my start in Indiana and Minnesota from a guiding standpoint, not from a personal fishing. I said I grew up fishing on Clair and Detroit. They didn't have any demand for a casting guide at that point. So I went where the clientele wanted to go. And when I was able to kind of come back home and had enough of a clientele, enough reputation built up from my earlier days in Minnesota and Indiana to kind of get some clients there, we started venturing out into deep water more and doing more of the open water casting concept. And that really took off and kind of changed the game for us over here, and really helped to certify my position in my career and the guide service and the whole thing. And it was just it's been an incredible journey experiencing all of that. And some of the early days was some unbelievable times.
Yeah, well, you used to be out there by yourself in the middle of the lake. It's not like that so much anymore. Yeah,
absolutely. No, the first. I mean, we got a little time. So the first time I ever really truly branched out, it didn't happen overnight, obviously, but the one day that I kind of tell everybody was the day that it kind of clicked. I was guiding on St. Clair. We started on opener, and kind of like when you were here, the opening day, you were here like a week into the season when you came out. There's a pretty good push of fish that come up shallow post spawn and stick around, especially if you've got good weed growth. The problem is as you get after opener, those fish start moving back out towards the main lake. And I had done really well the first 2 weeks of the season, but then we were in late June and it was a colder spring. The open water, or the fish were leaving the shallow water. The weeds weren't up to hold them in there a little bit longer. And a lot of our main summer stuff hadn't really started yet. Just the open water weed beds and things, and the weed beds around the St. Clair River weren't coming in good yet. So I was kind of rotating back between fishing post-spawn areas that had kind of petered out, trying to find some casting fish, or maybe a mile or two offshore in some weed areas that just weren't coming through. And then also doing trolling out in the open water area, completely offshore, 10, 14, 15 miles out. And what had happened was the casting bite for me had just really dried up. And I had guys that 2 days in a row wanted to go out wanted to go out trolling. And back at that point, I used to do, a fair amount of the back and forth, depending on what guys wanted to do. And I think the first day we caught like 12, and the second day we caught 14 or something with one 50-incher. And then the following day, I had guys that were casting only. So I went back to the shallow water and did horrible. Had like one bite, or maybe I think we caught like a 3-footer or something. It didn't see squat. And the following day, I had the same client. I said, it's like, man, the casting bite in the shallows just didn't work. And like, we caught 26 fish in 2 days trolling in 20 foot of water in the middle of nowhere, but I've got all the waypoints and I've trolled that area forever. We should be able to go out there and just zombie drift in the middle of nowhere with no structure, no weeds, no nothing, and just throw rubber. And all I caught yesterday was 1 3-footer. So what do I have to lose? And the first drift, we caught 6 in an hour. And I think we ended up with 12 or 13 that day. We had 2 over 50 with a 53 and a 52. And I called Brad Rue, that owns Musky Innovations, that night. And I told him, I said, I don't exactly know what I've stumbled into, but I think it's going to be a big deal. And from there, we kind of that was where I kind of finally lost that fear of going out there with no weeds and no structure. Because it used to be like, if there were some weed areas, some of the wrecks had some weeds, we would try to cast them. But that was the first day where you really went out with literally no structure at all. You start your drift in 20 foot of water, you drift a mile, you're still in 20 foot of water, and you're just looking for bait fish and hoping to run across muskies. And that was back around 2010 and 11. And from there, we just started dialing it in more and more. And it was truly amazing just how naive and dumb the fish are and how fun it was to target them back in the day. And it's a cool situation where you get to deal with fish that have never seen and experienced that before.
Yeah, when you're first onto fish and fish haven't seen your game before, they are dumb. And fish that haven't seen baits the way that you're presenting them, they eat everything, and then they start to learn a little bit more.
They got conditioned here. Actually, I do have a video here I could pull up here if I can throw it in. No, not that one. That was not what I was looking for. Sorry here for the delay. There you go. This one's called, I named this one Dumb Fish 2. I have 2 dumb fish videos. This is from like 2012. This is about as bad of a figure 8 as you can do. The fish is so darn aggressive, he basically takes the thing head on at boat side on just absolutely a terrible figure 8. But it just goes to show when those fish have it, there's no boat shyness at all. No concerns about you or what's happening over top of them. And just that those open water fish, they've been trolled for 100 years, but they had never really seen the casting presentations before. They'd never seen pull pause baits like the big rubber. And we definitely had a couple years there where it was, it was really cool. But also as the fish have become more conditioned, because that's all kind of a thing of the past, and they're definitely plenty conditioned now. But we've also managed to balance that out by being able to dial in the fishery so much better, because when you're kind of the only guy out there doing what you're doing, and there's not a lot of people to bounce ideas off of or to see how they're doing, it's hard to dial in patterns. Because that's one thing I learned. When you've got no one to talk to, no one else is out there casting. When you go out and you have a day where you strike out, were you doing something too fast, too slow, wrong spots, wrong colors, or were they just not biting? And there's no way to really know that. That's one of the things about, as you dial in the patterns more and you have a network, you actually get to figure out if you were doing it wrong, or once again, there's days that muskies just don't really want to cooperate. And you might have done it all right and you still didn't get the bites, and you should go back out and do the same thing again. And the only way you can make those determinations is by talking to other guys that are on the same water on the same day, and then using that repetition over time to kind of learn and evolve with your patterns.
Yeah, wow, there's a bunch of things to unpack there. Fishing as a pack was something that I had to talk to you about later on. I have a group of people that when they're out on the water, we talk. They're people that I trust intimately, that I'm willing to share information with, and then back. And fishing with you do the same thing as well. How important is fishing as a pack?
Yeah, so I mean, like obviously, in my career, I've fished a lot of different areas, and the bigger the lake, the more important it obviously becomes. So a lake like St. Clair at 274,000 acres, it's just crucial. It's absolutely essential to have a good group of people that you truly trust, and that's one of the things that I tell people that that we're selling as a guide service. It's not just the boat and the equipment and things. It's being on the water every day and also getting feedback from other people that are on the water every day. In fact, one of the main ways that I was able to, to dial in the open water casting thing, especially in the beginning and also today, is I was lucky enough to be friends with some of the best troller, in my opinion, by far the best troller in the lake, which is Jason Quintano. He was, we've been friends for a long time. He was the best man at my wedding. He's gonna be on your show here in another month. And when you have a guy like him and a couple others that are out in 31-foot boats trolling at 4 miles an hour with 12 rods out in a 200-foot spread, we call them our search and destroy vessels, because like I can only cover just a fraction of the water. But when I'm not on fish, and I tell him like, man, I'm not liking what my graph's showing me. Jason, he's covering 4 miles an hour, and all of a sudden he's like, hey, I just had a double header right here. Here's the waypoint. Go over and hit it. And that kind of information is just essential and was absolutely is to this day critical in being able to try to stay on those fish, because unfortunately they move and they move fast. So they make our lives difficult, but it's good job security for a guide too.
Yeah, my time with Jason blew my mind. He is one of, if not the most technical troller that I have ever been with. And Jason was flipping through pages of notes to set his 4 rods out of one side and have every bait running meticulously exactly where he wanted in the water column. For people that think that trolling is dragging a bait, that might have worked a bunch of years ago when the fish didn't know what was going on, but they do. And being a precision troller is what it's all about. And Jason takes it to a whole nother level. Now, we said some nice things about Jason. I'm going to ask you a true or false, because you and I think the same thing. So true or false, Spencer? Fish caught trolling count for half, and fish caught trolling on Clair don't count at all.
Jason would really get angry at me if I answered that in one way, but it's a different application. Obviously, it's a little more rewarding when there's a rod in your hand. That's what I'm selling, because at the end of the day, I can't compare with 12 rods going at 4 miles an hour. But like I said, it's more of an ownership stake when you actually work the lure, feel the strike, and they both have their merit. But like I said, at the end of the day, trolling on St. Clair in a big boat is a whole nother world and is truly different than anything else in musky fishing, if you ask me.
Yeah, you and I are both casters. We want to die casting, and we want our guests to have that experience at the side of the boat. But in truth, the last bunch of years, I'm 85-20. I have some guests that I just troll with, and we actually outproduce. We've outproduced my casting time the past few years. So in terms of numbers, yeah, it's hard to compete with a bunch of baits always in the water, always there for the fish versus working it up.
Yeah, I mean, they both have their merit. Like obviously casting, we trigger a much higher percentage of fish that we encounter, but we encounter far less. You're not doing the mile. When you actually compare the mileage, our baits are more effective, but that's also because you have the human impact of actually working them. But like for me, when you're comparing my numbers to say a 31 Tierra, I mean, they're running 12 rods and they normally have at least 3 to 4 to 5, maybe 5 clients plus a captain and a first mate. If you divide it by person, it becomes a little bit more competitive. And big fish wise, that's one of the things where we do very well. They catch plenty of big ones as well, but the casting bite produces a lot of the big fish because the big fish are more discriminating. The small fish, they're a little less discriminating, so they're a little more likely to grab whatever comes by them. And that's, a lot of those 34 to 43 inchers. It's more about the first bait that comes by them when the window's open. The bigger fish will watch bait after bait after bait go by them. without potentially triggering. And not that the big boats don't catch big fish, they absolutely do. But that is, the casting bite does produce a lot of very, very big fish. And you look at some of the biggest catches, like our Michigan Ontario Musky Club has a competition for the longest fish in the whole club every year. And I've won that the last 2 years, and the year before Jason won it in the big boat. But the casters have done very, very well. In fact, Jason caught the longest fish on the lake casting after 100 some years of St. Clair being a trolling mecca, and now the longest fish on the lake in lake's history is a casting fish. So that's always cool. And seeing how we can consistently put up the longest fish of the year, for 100 or so people, not every year, but a disproportional amount, is very, very telling to how effective those casting presentations are for the really big fish in the system.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how much success you and Jason have had in the tournaments and events out on Clair, and how many people you're fishing against. And the cream rises to the top, and you and Jason are always there. That speaks volumes. We have a question from Mike Zulsdorf. Mike's in Washington, D.C., and he's somebody that writes for Musky Hunter, like you do a lot. And his question is, you mentioned stumbling on this open water strategy. You think this strategy may be underused on bodies of water where there may be large Cisco populations on the shield lakes, example, Lake of the Woods and Eagle Lake. What do you think of that, Spencer?
I think overall, in general, I think open water fishing is underutilized pretty much everywhere. And if you look at the way a lot of the guides are targeting, the way a lot of the tournaments are getting won, there's more PMTT money getting won offshore and on rubber than just about anything else. And the one big factor that's really changed the whole game is the electronics. Side imaging was a total game changer in the open, being able to effectively dial in an open water bite, because obviously it's harder to do than shallow water, situations. So as the electronics get better, you're going to see it become more and more of a thing, and as more anglers are comfortable using them. But going back to like my days I fished Eagle, quite a bit. I watched Herbeck throwing at bluff walls when the boat's sitting in 50 foot of water, and 40 foot of water, which I never would have done before I saw him do it, and it worked. So I think it's definitely underutilized. You need fish high in the column. St. Clair is definitely kind of the ideal scenario because you have, it's shallow. The deepest part of the lake is 24 foot right now. Depending on what our water levels do, it might go down, hopefully down a foot. But we're overall such a shallow body of water where even if those fish are belly to bottom, 24 foot is 1 foot longer than the length of my boat. So it's nothing for a fish that's on the bottom to come up and hit a bait. And it's also very easy to get rubber baits down to, anywhere between 8 to 16 foot of water down. So now all of a sudden you're asking a fish that's near the bottom only come, maybe 7, 8, 9 foot, which is nothing for them. So when you get in some of the deeper water lakes, if those fish are 50 feet down, it's going to be a challenge. But whenever they're willing to come up in the column and you can find fish in that open water, there's no doubt in my mind that those fish spend more of their time in deeper water than they do in shallow. They're just easier to target when they're shallow.
Yeah, you mentioned something really interesting in that statement about watching Steve Herbeck do something that you wouldn't have done otherwise. And I often say musky anglers are a lot like muskies. We're very visually oriented people, and we have to see it to believe it. And after you see it, it's the light bulb goes off and it's locked in. And so
there's no doubt. That's one of the things we've seen with the rubber fishery on St. Clair. How many people have, kind of shied, just never really gotten the rubber thing. Always bucktails are so easy, and it's what we all kind of start with. I caught my first muskie in a bucktail, as did probably 80 some or maybe even more % of the musky fishermen in general. But when people come out in my boat or come out, and fish on St. Clair, where it's really a rubber-based environment, and they catch a few fish on rubber, it's amazing how many of them can take that back to their home bodies of water and have a ton of success. And like I said, when you go back to the tournament series and just, different bodies of water in general, it's like bucktails. It's a concept that works everywhere. like, you know, the rubber fishing in general, it's not always going to every day in, day out be the best, but it's going to work on any given system. And there's going to be points on every system in the world where that is the best pattern for that given day. So
now you and I are going to talk a bunch about rubber baits because, you know, that's your game, and you've had so much, that's your main game, and you've had so much success with that. But I want to play a little bit of yin and yang here with numbers. And so there's statements in the musky world that blow people's minds. And so you've blown my mind a couple of times with things that you've said when I've been out in the boat with you. And just in terms of numbers, you were catching, I was going to ask, I told people I'd ask you if you'd ever caught 1,000 muskies. Because when I was first hanging out with you, you were like 870 fish the previous year or something. And so, you know, a lot of people go, you can't catch 870 muskies in a year. What planet are you on? And the answer is you're on planet Clair, which if you're old, you know that that's a cool B-52 song. But in the modern day, I mean, planet Clair or Lake St. Clair, that is not like any other musky fishery in the world, not even close. The numbers of fish in there, the population of fish, and what people catch. So did you ever get close to 1,000?
So yeah, my goal in the early seasons there was to hit 1,000 fish, and I wanted 150 inchers in a year. I never accomplished either. I got 872 was the highest I ever got, and then 63 50 inchers was the best I ever did. I had one, the 2000, I believe it was 13. I had 62 50 inchers, and that was the year we had Hurricane Sandy hit, and I lost over a month of not of fishing. I lost about 10 days of fishing because of the hurricane, but I lost a month of catching. So our numbers we got just thrashed by the hurricane, and our numbers were absolutely. I think I went 33 days without a 50 incher. So that year I probably could have hit 75 if it wasn't for that, because I lost so much time, and that was in November and October, which is prime time. But yeah, so 63 over 50 is my best year ever. Lately we're down a little bit from that. Our top end's a little bit lacking because of the year classes. They're coming around really nicely though, with a lot of fish up, should be up to the mid 53 range, 53 and change this year. But you know, anytime you have a natural fishery, you're going to have ups and downs in your year classes. And right now I've got to fill out that 50 inch range all the way up to 55 or so, which where we tend to start losing a lot of our fish on the very top end. But yeah, our numbers right now are, you know, good years are in the 40 to 50 inch range, and then 5 to 650 fish or so. So
I feel bad for you.
160 so days a year. I have to admit though too, like back in some of the 800 fish years, I also used to fish a little bit more. Those are my 20 something years where I would fish for 12 hours with clients, then go back out for 4 by myself like an idiot. Those days are not happening anymore.
You know, I wish I had the energy to do that. It just, you need to, there's a progression of energy and yeah, a whole lot of other progressions in fishing.
Yeah, I still do my fair share of 13, 14 hour days, but yeah, I'm not going out in the dark after clients are done. It's a couple hours of sleep and then do it all over again.
Yeah, it's a grind. It's a tough lifestyle to do that all season. Those are crazy numbers. And then let's go on the yang side of that. You wrote a really interesting article in Musky Hunter a couple years ago talking about how hard it is to catch muskies for average anglers, for tournament anglers. Let's talk about that article a little bit, and you know what came out of it.
Yeah, skunked. I think it was what Hiding called it. I think I had termed it the real numbers of musky fishing. Either one works. What it basically talked about was, you know, it just all my years of musky fishing. If you actually look at the true numbers involved in musky fishing, they're pretty dismal. The tournaments are a great example. The tournament catch rates are terrible. I mean, your hours per fish or days per fish is astronomical. The reason I wanted to write that article was just kind of to give a lot of people that I think get kind of depressed over, you know, some of their lacks of success when they go through those stretches that aren't great. And also kind of remind people that although, you know, you hear so many stories about the day, you know, the magic day, those are just the stories you hear about. And I mean, I had it kind of happen to me a little bit, especially back earlier when people were first coming to Clair for the first times, and they'd heard all these stories of, you know, my best ever casting day is 22 fish. I mean, I had a day we caught 5 over 50 in a day casting, but those are one day in a decade plus of guy. This is my 14th season now, so 13 years in the books, and that's 160 some days a year. So you're talking, you know, over 2,000 days of guiding for one day where I caught 22, for one day where we had 5 50-inchers casting in a day. So when you come out, you can't get discouraged by the fact that, you know, we caught X amount of fish, and, you know, maybe we, you know, I heard, well, we didn't even get a 50 today. I heard that line a couple times, and it kind of shook me. And it's like, man, that's not a realistic, that's a goal, obviously, but you can't consider every day a failure if you don't get 10 fish or you don't get a 50-incher, because at the end of the day, the numbers of musky fishing are not that good. Even the numbers on Clair, I think in that article, I boiled down my own numbers. And when you took out some of the crazy days, I mean, when you eliminated those from the equation, I think in the article I talked about, like, my best day was like 19 that year. And then I had, I don't know, maybe half a dozen or a dozen days where we had double digits. And if you eliminated those 15 days from the total numbers and then did the average dropped from like 5 fish a day to 2.8 just by eliminating those 20 days, 15 days out of a 160-day season. So, I mean, although you always hope for those days, you know, fishing is not a game of averages. Fishing is a game of extremes where you go, you know, and it's the same for anything. It's the same for smallmouth, for walleye. You go out and catch 100 smallies one day, then you have 3 days where you can't get 15 of them in the boat, and you come up with a 40-a-day average. But that's not necessarily indicative of what you can expect on every trip.
Yeah, we're gonna get on to the topic of rubber baits in a moment, but tournament results and how dismal they are. That's a lot of really, really experienced guys, and in a lot of cases, guys fishing on their home waters and waters that they know well. So in Canada, we don't run any tournaments up here, largely because we don't stock up here, and a lot of anglers can do damage to a population through handling or catching fish on hot days at the wrong times. You and I have exchanged some stories on those, but we'll talk a bit about what the Professional Musky Tournament Trail is, and I'll lead into this by saying I wanted to experience this about 16 years ago. So I went down with Mike Spratt, my partner in Musky Factory Baits, to Cave Run, Kentucky for an outing in April, and I went and fished it in early April. I had a really great local guide named Denny Ortlieb. Denny'd been fishing Cave Run since the start. I went out on that water. We got 9 fish in 15 hours, and I thought, this is good. I'm going to come back and teach these Americans how to catch fish on their water. And then I came back for the tournament, and they had the mother of all cold fronts come in. And there were 270 anglers who caught 19 fish over 2 days.
I think I was there that year.
500. Did you catch a fish?
Oh, I don't catch very many fish in Kentucky. When I go to Kentucky, for the PMT, it's a great body of water, and like Cave Run is a good fishery, but it does not agree with me. I don't look at timber, and none of it makes sense to me. So when I go, I pray that I can stumble into a 30-incher and get some points for Team of the Year, and I can leave. And I think I've cashed 1 check there in more tries than I care to guess. But that's reservoir fishing. That's one of the great things about tournament fishing, though. You know, when you go up against a bunch of guys that make a living, the Greg Thomases and Tony Grants of the world that make a living fishing timber every day, you know, you're out of your element. But when you go up to an open water fishery and you can do what I like to do, it's going to play more into my hand, but it makes you a better fisherman in general, no matter what. But to answer your question, no, I definitely did not catch a fish that year.
You know what? Nobody knows that water better than Tony or Greg, and I know Tony didn't catch a fish in that tournament as well. And I don't know if Greg did either. But 19 fish, 270 guys, 2 days. Wow! And the PMTT results are, there's a bunch of tournaments where the scores are really low like that.
Oh yeah, yep. No, and it's very tough too as a tournament angler when you have those tough results, because it's so hard to pattern. You can be down there pre-fishing for 4 or 5 days, and if you don't see but a couple fish, it's tough to hang your hat on it. I've been in that situation a lot where we caught one in pre-fishing, but it's like, was that just one random fish that happened to be there, or is that a pattern? And we stuck the one that we caught, so he's out of play probably for Saturday morning anyway. So. I mean, a lot of times you're fishing on gut, and that's where it's tough to beat locals in that scenario, because they know where to go when things get tough, and they have the confidence to stick it out doing that when it gets tough. And when the same thing can be said for me when everyone comes to my home body of water. When you come to Clair, I hope it blows 40 miles an hour. I want the weather, the worst weather you can imagine, because I know how to fish that, and I know I've got the boat to do it and everything else, and I want it to be harder than everybody else because it gives me an advantage. Just like when you go to Cave Run, when that water goes up 30 feet in a week, which I've seen it do, I don't know where to go. I've never fished in a parking lot before. I've never fished over top of a street light, or I've seen an outhouse or porta potty on my side imaging that I was 10 feet over top. I've never done that. I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, fish the parking lots and the picnic tables was a good expression I came with out of there. And Spencer did just say when the water rises 30 feet.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens on a lot of the reservoirs. And holy mackerel, that rocks your world. So This is a good introduction to tournament and soft plastics. One of the coolest things I've seen you do in recent times, you won the PMTT championship a couple of years ago.
Yeah, 18.
Fishing on Webster in Indiana, and I watched the video of you winning that. Mind-blowing. You got your 40-mile-an-hour winds, I think. 30-40 mile an hour winds on that day, and you did something that that nobody else did, at least on the first day. You went out and threw giant soft plastics at mid 30-inch fish, and you won the tournament with that. So talk about plastics, talk about giant plastics. Do you ever downsize?
No, I shy away from downsizing big time. But I mean, the bottom line is when you're looking at baits, like here's a pounder here. So when you look at a pounder, like to me, like I think the profile is basically have to eliminate the tail. The tail is pretty much there to attract. It's not true profile. The profile is this, which that is the equivalent of like an 8 or 9 inch sucker tops. I wrote an article for Musky Hunter a couple years ago where I put a pounder and a couple other baits against and actually set them on a bump board next to a couple of bait fish, like a 14-inch walleye. I had a 19-inch shad I showed a picture of that had a big bite mark out of the back, and it just dwarfed these baits. And at the end of the day, these baits, in my opinion, are big for us. They're big for our shoulders. They're big for our backs and our bodies to huck around. But at the end of the day, they're not too big for these fish. And you watch what eats these things. You watch how many snot rocket pike and 30 inchers will eat them. It doesn't really inspire you to downsize a whole lot. And to be honest with you, in that tournament, particularly in the PMTT there, I was fishing with Matt Quintano, Jason's brother, who's been my longtime tournament partner for forever on the trail. I was actually probably leaning more towards throwing mag dogs, but he pulled out a pounder within the first couple hours of our pre-fishing day. He'd been down there the week before I was guiding, and he'd caught a couple on pounders, and I was throwing a mag and he was throwing a pounder. And I think I did say something stupid to him, like 30-inch size. We had a 30-inch minimum in the PMTT, which is the one thing with pounders, like 30-incher. I don't care. I don't really feel that bad about 3-footers and that, but 30's a small muskie. And I had said something to him about that, and I didn't get it out of my mouth, and he caught like a 30 and a half, like literally on the spot as I was finishing the sentence. And that was in pre-fishing, and I said, all right, I'll just be quiet. Like, obviously I knew Webster had a ton of fish in in that 30 to 40 inch range based on the stocking and what everybody was telling us from what had been caught. And we, we went about throwing rubber like we normally do, and luckily it paid off. So, but it was a crazy event though. Holy smoke, a lot of fish got caught and some unbelievable weather. We had wind gusts over 50 miles an hour.
Crazy stuff. So you're big baits in the spring, big baits in the summer, big baits in the fall, big baits all the time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I work around clients, capabilities and things like that. But for me, I start out the season throwing a pounder on St. Clair. Now, granted, we can't get out super early. I mean, we're closed till the first Saturday in June, as you guys are till the end of June. So we're not fishing fish pre-spawn or anything like that. But I had a guy a couple years ago on opening morning. It was like 6 in the morning. We were putting our boats in. Guy pulled me aside and said, hey, I know you are. I just want to ask you one quick question. You put your boat in. He said, do you start out with a pounder on opening day? And I said, absolutely. It's on my rod right now, and I'm throwing it right out of the gate as soon as the sun comes up. And I wish I knew the guy's name or number, because I went out that morning. I made like maybe 15 casts, and I caught about a 17-inch smallmouth bass on a pounder. It's like, if there's ever any more evidence that it's not that big, that is perfectly fitting, especially given the intro to my day talking to him in the morning at the ramp.
Yeah, wow. I remember throwing casts in the first half an hour in your boat, and I thought I had a monster muskie coming in behind my bait, and what it was 7 5-pound smallmouth, all like this in behind the bait. I could see it coming. It was brown and it was big, and it's a whole lot of smallmouth chasing the big bait. So
yeah.
Wow. So you can't go too big where you're from.
No, that's always kind of been my theory. I mean, obviously there's no golden bullet. I mean, there are days that it does seem like maybe downsizing is best. On Clair, I don't really find too many of them. I think there's days sometimes that maybe a regular reduce out produces a pounder, but I think that they're wanting the 3 tails more than the 1, or vice versa. But at the end of the day, these baits, they move a lot of water and they get noticed. And I think they're not that big of a profile for any muskie that you're worried about catching. So they'll eat them. And if you ever live bait fish, man, I mean, you watch what will try to eat a 5, 6, 7 pound sucker. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of low 30-inch northerns you're going to catch on what I would consider a giant sucker. So, I mean, that was a pretty eye-opening experience too. When I first started using some of the really big stuff to live bait, just what you would catch on them was mind-blowing, and it gave you a lot of confidence towards throwing the bigger baits, kind of day in, day out. So I always tend to go that way. I like how they move water. I like how they displace and get noticed, and also I'm not fishing a finesse deal. I'm fishing an open water fishery where these fish are moving great distances to engage your bait, and you need to get their attention because you're not throwing 12 casts at one rock reef that might have a fish on it. Those fish are generally moving a decent distance to engage those lures.
We've got a good question here from Eric Fredrickson. Do you generally rip rubber or pull pause? Does your retrieve change throughout the season? Yes,
it actually does. Quite a bit. Actually, we got a couple of videos for that. That first one that I uploaded, if Lisa would throw that one up there. There you go. So yeah, play that one. So I always use a pull pause retrieve. We playing the video?
Maybe.
It's trying. It says it's playing, but it doesn't show it. Here, I can share it again.
You've got it on yours? Okay.
Oh, shoot. I can only share up to 3. I got to remove some. So, yeah. So, generally speaking, I always use a pull pause retrieve on mine. I never straight crank them. I know some people do. I just have never had any success doing that. I am always using a pull pause retrieve. I think it should be coming through now. I just re-uploaded it. There you go. So this is Brad Rue, the owner of Musky Innovation, the first inventor of the Bulldog. Give you so it's that pull pause retrieve where you're pulling that bait and you're reeling up the slack, pull that bait and reel up the slack. And what that bait's doing then is it's going to drop and then jump, drop and jump. That's giving that up-down motion, that stop-and-go motion. It's going to trigger those strikes. I'll show you with the bait a little bit more once the video is done. This is a nice July fish from Clair.
That's pretty clear. That's pretty clear looking water.
Yep. So on St. Clair, we generally have real clear water, especially now with the high water. We have a lot clearer water than we used to. However, with Clair, we have a lot of different variants between them based on where in the system you are. I also uploaded 2 more videos, but we'll show those in a minute. So yeah, that's a July open water mid-lake watercolor. And generally speaking, most of our mid-lake area and are anything other than the far east side of the lake, you're normally going to have at least 3 to 5 foot of visibility, if not 6, 7, or 8. So, but yeah, what I'm doing with that bait is I'm pulling that bait and I'm reeling up the slack, pull the bait, reel up the slack. And what that's doing then is you're going to give that bait that drop and then jump and then drop and then jump. So that motion, that jigging motion, that stopping and going is a big trigger, and the up and down that's creating is a huge trigger for those fish. The vast majority of your strikes are always going to come when the bait is falling. Now, there's a couple big things to remember when you're doing that. The first one is you want to make sure that you give that bait enough slack that it can fall. Like you want that bait to fall head first down like that, so that way you get that real quick change in direction when it comes back up. What a lot of guys do wrong, especially with the high-speed reels now that are very popular, and nothing against them, but a lot of times people over-reel where they keep so much tension on that bait that the bait doesn't fall straight. Instead, it falls at an angle like this coming across, and then you don't get that change in direction. It's only a 90-degree turn rather than a beyond a 90 coming back up like that. And you seem to trigger a lot less strikes. The way that I work my rubber baits, I actually let them fall pretty much on a free fall with a lot of slack in the line. And then I actually engage the lures with a touch of slack, so that way they really rip through the column. The next video I uploaded is a pretty good view. There. You see, I'm the guy in the back. Can we restart it over real quick just so they can see it again? They didn't catch it because it's a little short. So you see how I'm ripping that bait, and I kind of kick that rod back into the lure. And so that way you really are ripping that bait through the water, and it gives it, especially this is only in the summertime. In the fall, I start to slow way down. But in the summertime, it gives it a lot of directional change, and it really is good for that warm water conditions where those fish are very active. Their metabolic rates are high. And, and ultimately those fish are willing to chase down baits that are moving a lot quicker. That's pretty much all. It's the 51.5, I believe. But nice fish. But anyway, so that's kind of the gist of it as far as how I work them in the summer. The last video I uploaded here is a video from that I filmed with Keys. Now, this is in December. So you'll notice he's working the baits. We're all working the baits super slow. The water temperature was like 38 degrees. So much colder. And that situation, I slow way down. I want that bait to just kind of, real slowly move through the water, short pulls, only moving the bait maybe a foot to a foot and a half, 2 foot tops, versus the summer, it's more of a 3 to 4 foot rip. And ultimately working them super slow for those fish with the slower metabolic rate. And then throughout the year, going from warm water to cold water, it's kind of a gradual shift for me from the super aggressive 70+ degree water temperature to the super cold in the 30s going, I tell my clients, fish like you're 90 routine in the late fall.
Let's go back to your fishery is like the Ottawa River in that it's dynamic in terms of color. You can lose your color on Clair, right? And different areas can be brown.
Oh
and
yeah.
other areas are clear. So what do you look for in terms of an ideal color? Do you care?
Yeah,
How do
so
you adjust
it
that?
depends. It depends on what we're what we're doing. But for casting, it seems like you definitely ideally you want water that's right around 3 to 4 foot of visibility. If you get under 2, it starts getting a little dingy for catching fish consistently. There's a couple situations, especially when they're set up in dirty water for extended periods of time, where they can start to become a little bit more agreeable. But generally speaking, when you get under 2 foot of clarity, it's a trolling game. Like those baits, I think, just need to track for long periods of time in a straight line to get those strikes. But for whatever reason, we really struggle casting when that water gets below 2 foot. So ideally, 3 to 4 foot is about what I want, because you start getting any clearer than that, they start getting real spooky. They're tough to trick, and also you tend to really lose your bait fish population. The bait does not want to be caught in 10, 12 foot of visibility. That's just way out in the open for them. That's not what they're looking for. Shad are primarily filter feeders, so they need particles in the water and things to eat. And you're just that super gin clear bath type water is not going to support a lot of bait fish for us. And the fish get spooky, and they're hard to catch, and there's obviously less of them. So that 3 to 4 foot is always what we're looking for. A lot of times we have to settle for either too dingy or too clear, because like you said, it changes drastically, but that's always what I'm looking for. So.
Yeah, on our river, we have all kinds of tributaries, and we have very localized thunderstorms. So, you can have very different visibility in different sections. I used to seek out the 3 to 4 foot visibility sections religiously years ago. That was a key for me. And then I had an experience with Gord Pizer a few years ago where he asked me about a brown water bay, and I said, we don't go in there, it's too dirty. And he just looked at me and said, really? And I knew that I had missed something. So I actually kind of I don't like the zero visibility water, but I'm not as intimidated up here in less visibility, 1 and 2 foot range. You have to fish it differently. You have to fish it slower. You have to finish longer at the side of the boat. But I almost think that helps you sometimes with bigger fish up here, because they just don't get as good a look at what you're trying to trick them with. They're more experienced. They make less mistakes. But
yeah, no, I agree. And another big one for us is what are our sky conditions and things. So like obviously, we have different populations of fish in St. Clair, and when we have a clear water, when we have an overcast day with some wind, then we'll definitely tend to hit more of the clear water stuff because we have good conditions for that. And then when you have the high skies, bluebird skies with no wind, then I'm definitely heading towards the more stained water. So that's always another factor as well. Okay.
How important is finding bait fish for you when you go fishing? You touched on it earlier, but
it's everything. I mean, using electronics, specifically side imaging, is super, super important. When you don't have a lot of structure in a lake like St. Clair, I mean, there's only one thing for those fish to relate to, and that's bait. So, and at the end of the day, I mean, above all else, I mean, they're going to go where the food is, and we're targeting feeding fish. We're targeting fish that are actively chasing, bait fish. They're not they're not on a reef or on a bar raising their body temperature, digesting food. These fish are hunting. So finding bait fish is absolutely key, and that's where the electronics comes in. I mean, I spend a lot of time driving areas, just I pull up to a spot, I drive through a set of waypoints, see if I see anything, and if I don't like when I'm marking, I don't even make a cast.
No bait fish, no muskies. Pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Yep. And then if you go through and the graph lights up, then it's time to make a drift.
I remember fishing with you and Jason on a school of shad, probably 2 kilometers long. Sorry for being Canadian on you there with the kilometers. But, we looked at this and all of the hooks off of it. And you said to me, how many muskies do you think are off that school of shad? I have no idea. You said maybe a couple thousand.
Mm-hmm.
That was out in the middle of the water. And that just that's an incredible statement, and an incredible statement about how big the fish population is on Clair, on that open water. And any idea what the population is on Clair?
No, we've never had a pop. I mean, it's not stocked, so it's all natural. So that makes it obviously a lot harder to gauge. And we've never done any sort of a true density study on the lake itself. We've done telemetry studies and things, but never any true density studies. I've heard numbers anywhere from 50 to 70,000 up to 1 an acre, which would be 274,000. I think it falls in the middle. I think it's 120 to 150,000 or so in the whole system itself. But like I said, it's a giant system, so that sounds like a huge number, but it's a real big fishery. And if they scatter, I mean, you're talking 0.67 an acre, which in a lot of places isn't even that exciting. But the nice thing when you're dealing with big water, like what you were talking about with that big school of shad, is when you have a big water situation like this, if you can get just 5% of the fish in a 2-mile area, it's an absolutely absurd amount of muskies that can be located in one spot. As you've seen with the Thames River, Detroit River, any of the areas where they really congregate. If you can get just a fraction of the fish in one pretty condensed area, you can make for some great fishing and some unbelievable numbers. But also there are the days where you swear they're in a darn fish in the whole lake when they kind of scatter. So that's $1 million question.
Not catching fish is part of what we do. You and I had an interesting talk yesterday on the state of the club scene. I'm a big supporter of Muskies Canada. And you and I had similar views as to the importance. Muskies Canada is up here, Muskies Incorporated in the States. And for a lot of people who aren't members of that club, why would I want to be a member there? And you and I know more than a lot of other people that there are no advocates for the muskie population. There are nobody who advocates for the muskies. There's nobody who gets the attention of the Ministry of Natural Resources or the Department of Natural Resources in the States. It's not something you can do as individuals. There's no other groups that shape muskie fishery management and regulations more than Muskies Canada and Muskies Incorporated. And so talk a little bit about the importance of those organizations for looking after the resource as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably there's a lot of reasons to be a Muskie Inc. or a Muskies Canada member, depending which side of the border you're on. But the biggest one, like you touched on, was it's just all about having, even if you don't go to any meetings, even if you don't love the club or you don't like the president or whatever it is, it's all about having an organization. Because at the end of the day, when you look at the way the DNRs and the governors and all that stuff are run, they won't talk to Spencer Berman. They won't talk to John Anderson. They will talk to a representative from a group of constituents, a group of people. I sit on the Warm Water Commission for the state of Michigan for our DNR, but I do it not as a guide or just an individual. I do it, for our club and also for the entire guide association as a whole. And it's just all about having that group. And at the end of the day, like you said, especially in America where we have a lot of stocking that happens, but also it's about, the size regulations, the possession limits. I mean, in Minnesota a couple years ago, it's still going on now, we have this No More Muskies movement where they have brainwashed people into thinking that they're attacking children and eating your dogs, and they're basically like borderline crocodiles or sharks. And the homeowners associations have worked very diligently in the state to try to remove all muskie stocking in the state is their ultimate goal. And it's Muskies Inc. that it lobbies and pushes and makes sure that they try to, fight all of that and try to increase the stocking and the regulation and all that stuff for our very fragile fisheries.
Yeah, it's looking after fish that were there from the beginning of time. It's not, in most cases, it's not putting fish in that never belonged there. They're a natural part of the ecosystem, and keeping that ecosystem intact and supporting native populations is the management of the fisheries. Very different approach in Canada and the States. You guys stock for a lot of various reasons. in Canada, it's all wild fish fisheries. And so managing those, monitoring those populations, monitoring the change in the environment, the invasive species, how well the population is doing, all of those are critical factors, and even more so, going forward with increased pressure, way more knowledgeable anglers, technology that puts people who never would have found fish on fish. And so, having these organizations, they have your back. They teach you as anglers to catch more fish, but more than that, they have the back of the fish itself and the populations. And so, critical organizations. If you love muskies, you gotta support these groups and what they want to do. And
Yep, absolutely. Even if you don't go to one, I'd urge everybody, if you don't go to one meeting, even if you don't look at any of their subscriptions, just if you're a person that uses the resource, in my opinion, you should join just for the sake that they are the #1 group out there that supports and protects our fisheries and makes what we do possible.
Yep. And, the internet's allowing people like you and I to get on and educate people. But, the meetings themselves, you're a speaker who travels and has spoken at so many state shows, but more than that, so many chapter events,
Yep.
where you get one-on-one time with you in there. And that's invaluable learning, that the membership gets access to. I could talk to you for hours, and I know you could talk about muskie for hours more. We try and keep this to around 90 minutes, and maybe that's a pretty good place for us to end today. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for imparting the knowledge that you do. Thanks for being an advocate of the muskie fishery like you are. And personally, I've enjoyed sharing a boat with you, both on Clair and both here on the Ottawa River. Great personal learning. I can't wait to do that again, my friend. So we will talk. We will talk.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real blast. Time flew. I can't believe we've already been talking for an hour, but like you said, we wouldn't have any trouble filling the time. But thank you
I got 20
for
more.
having me. I really appreciate it.
I got 20 more questions I didn't get to. Maybe next year, maybe later on, Spencer. All the best to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Appreciate it. And to everybody who tuned in again this week, thanks for being here. Keep sending your questions. What you want to hear, what you want to see is what drives what we're going to present in the future. So like Musky Factory on the YouTube channel. That's our new YouTube channel. And please or subscribe to our YouTube channel and like the Musky Factory Baits page. And we will see you all here again next week on the Musky Monday Seminar Series. All the best.